Welcome to Disruption Dialogues Podcast Season 2. Listen to the influential leaders and trailblazers from around the world as they share invaluable insights to navigating the fifth industrial revolution.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Disruption Dialogues Season 2. I'm Sarwant Singh, President and Chief Commercial Officer at Markets. Today, I'm in conversation with Tim Van Amstel, CEO at E.ON One. E.ON One is a young, perhaps as one could say, a startup within the big conglomerate E.ON, and we'll hear more from Tim what his organization is doing in terms of enabling energy transition. Thank you, Tim, for joining us today. Energy transition is a mega trend, one of the 12 we track that will impact our future world. We in Markets describe the future of energy as the 4 Ds: decentralization, digitalization, decarbonization, and democratization of energy. So today we are diving into the second D, fascinating topic of the digitalization of the energy sector. Markets analysts predict a significant increase in global energy investments, soaring from about 2.5 trillion today to over 5 trillion by 2030. Additionally, we are on track to transition from relying on approximately 80% fossil fuels today to a renewable energy supply comprising 2/3 of the market by 2050. The digital utility market is poised for remarkable growth, expected to reach anywhere between 250 and 300 billion within the next 3 to 5 years. Transformative technologies such as big data analytics, machine learning, blockchain, distributed energy resource management, cloud computing are fueling this growth. These innovations will play a crucial role in addressing critical challenges faced by the energy sector, such as intermittency, aging power grids, managing distribution connected generation, managing consumer self-generation, and effectively handling the increasing complexity of energy systems. So, Pim, my first question to you, tell us a little bit about E.ON One. I know about E.ON, but tell us a little bit about E.ON One and what is the agenda that you have?
Happy to do so. So first of all, E.ON One is a brand new company under the E.ON Group umbrella. I think a lot of people know E.ON as a relatively large utility. We are quite a big utility, which has a split focus between grid and retail. And retail also entails e-mobility, energy infrastructure solution, and the energy supply business. But now we actually have a third pillar, and that is E.ON One. And E.ON One fully focuses on digital, on software. And we believe that on the one hand, E.ON has a lot of internal developed technology, which is really cutting edge, able to enable the energy transition, which we need to share much more outside of E.ON, so with third parties on one hand. In addition to that, we also believe there's a lot of technology out there which we should bring even faster within the E.ON organization. So E.ON One, as a company, in its simplest form, is a software company with the main goal to actually sell software externally, fully digital, all related to the energy transition.
Thank you, Tim. So why set up E.ON as a subsidiary and not a team or a department? Normally, digital is everywhere now. So what's the rationale and thinking about doing so? And what kind of growth do you see for yourself in the market?
I think it would be good to also take a bit of a step back if you look at E.ON as an organization, because I think what I personally really like about one of the most important decisions that E.ON has taken is to actually have a full-time board member responsible for digital. So we have Dr. Victoria Sadnek. She's there since April 2021, and fully responsible for digital from a centralized point of view. So it's not linked to a certain business, but it's business overarching. I think that in itself was already quite a big and important decision for E.ON, and simply states that we do take digitization very serious. That is number one. Number two, so why have we actually set up a separate entity? Well, dealing with software is different than being a utility, right? Of course, we use technology, but developing our own technology and then actually bringing that out to the market, selling it externally, further expanding it is a different game. And we believe that it's best suited to do that in a standalone own entity with its own P&L responsibility. So also make sure that you do, in the end, realize sustainable growth, but fully focus on that mission to digitize the energy sector and enable the energy transition.
I totally agree with it, and it's quite forward-looking for Eon to have a board member of digitalization. I think that's the way forward in every board, if you ask me, in my opinion. The digital transformation, especially with the shift towards now general AI, just it just shows you the importance of doing it. So maybe one other question, just digressing a little bit. Our analysts describe the future of energy as the 4Ds, which I mentioned in my opening speech.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about, do you agree with that definition? And any opinion from your side?
Yeah, I fully agree. I think whether you see that as, let's say, are they the crucial ones or the key trends? I fully believe in them, to start with that, right? Decentralization, 100%, right? This is, in my view, more like a key trend that we are seeing, and also a result of the energy transition, because it is simply true that is this fundamental shift now happening from a more centralized conventional generation to much more distributed renewable assets, which only produce energy when there's either wind or solar or differently. And so there I'm fully with you. Same with digitization. I think it's on the one hand, I don't yet see digitization as a key trend, and this is what we as a company try to change, right? But I do believe it is crucial for success. Without digitization, we are unable to overcome the main challenges. I think it is really crucial to actually apply digitization. With regards to decarbonization, again, fully linked to energy transition, we need to act now, we need to change now, but it's not an easy journey. And I think a lot of people start realizing that, because we still work in a relatively old system, an old energy system, which is not fully fit for the future yet. And then digitization again comes in. You need to digitize in order to decarbonize. With regards to democratization, that's not one I generally mention. I always use more like, say, electrification is a key trend. I also see that as a one. It's a bit linked to all three others, but for me, electrification is actually a very important trend that we are seeing, and in my view, also crucial for enabling the energy transition, because we shift much more away from gas, particularly then change to electrical energy, which is the easiest to produce, let's say, in a sustainable way, and also allow decarbonization. Yeah, I'm fully with you. But democratization, I think I know what you mean. I do like it, though, I must say. So it makes me think maybe I should use it too. But I generally always use electrification.
So I think what we mean by democratization is, enabling and developing energy transition solutions which are more localized. For example, let's take the Middle East. It's full of solar energy. Likewise, you go to north of England and you've got so much wind. So I think that's what we mean is, and then having that local public participation in it. But I'm glad you mentioned electrification. I'm an electrical engineer, and when I passed out, I thought I don't have a future anymore because the whole world was shifting towards digital. But I'm glad to see that we do have a future. Moving on, Tim, how do you define digital? And we define it as the power to create new architectures of interconnected energy systems. Do you agree with that definition? And what is your definition of digital transformation of the energy industry?
Yeah, I think the way you described it, that fits quite well. I'm fully with you. I always say that digital is the enabler of the energy transition. I keep it even much simpler, because I think there's no way to achieve a fast energy transition without the digitization. And of course, the complexity is, if you dive more into the details, if you dive more into either the supply, the demand, or the transport side, every single segment has its own challenges, which require a certain, let's say, a digitization. If you would ask me, in the short term, what is needed? In the short term, we really need to make sure that we digitize all these single segments first. And then if we've done that, then you can actually solve the next big challenge of being able to make sure that these segments interconnect digitally. And that's another topic I'm sure we will further touch upon, is what I call flexibility. But I think in itself, I think the way you describe digitization is definitely key. However, what I always realize, what a lot of people don't realize, is what does digitization mean? And actually, it actually already starts with the basics. If you're operating a grid, to give you a very specific example, which is not at all digital, you're stuck and you have quite a big problem. Because, well, a lot of people see them just simply as cables and transformers, but you need to be able to continuously measure what actually flows through these cables, what flows through the transformers, and if something changes, or if millions of actually connection points are changing their electricity production or offtake, you need to be able to directly calculate that. But if you are still operating in a grid, which is working on so-called on-premise data storage, which means doesn't operate a grid in the cloud, you need to actually fulfill a certain amount of steps first until you can look at the bigger game. What I mean with that, a lot of people say, well, if you really want to know and understand what flows to the grid, just put a sensor in there. So I said, well, buying a sensor is easy. It's all commodity. You can easily buy it from the market. But a sensor generates such a large amount of real-time data that you need to store. And the amount of sensors that you need to apply is so incredibly huge that the amount of data is even bigger than what one single sensor would already generate. So digitization on the one hand is also creating the foundation, a digital, what we call backbone for example, the grid, that is able to deal with data. That is one. And secondly, on the base of that data, start to do even more complex calculations and handling that as well. And support even much more complex use cases.
Thank you, Tim. And Tim, what elements of digitalization of the energy transition do you see as having the most potential, the most growth?
Yeah, I always split that actually more into a customer type of segment. I think already mentioned grid. Grid digitization is a very big and important trend. This is a huge growth area. Secondly, I believe the so-called HEMS market, home energy management systems market. So if you are a homeowner, if you have PV, a smart meter, if you have a home storage battery and also an electric car and maybe even a heat pump, you need to be able to control that. That's what we call a home energy management system. I really believe that this market will really skyrocket in the upcoming period. Then thirdly, e-mobility is of course a big trend. I think nobody denies that, right? More and more electric cars coming onto the roads, and electric chargers created quite big peak demands in the grid, right, to charge them. Then more overarching flexibility, so being able to match supply of energy and demand of energy better together, real time. Fifthly, the heating space, because a lot of people somehow forget about that, because we still have a lot of heating grids, for example, in Germany, but also in East Europe. And these are, let's say, well-established heating grids. So it's not easy to just build there something new, and they also need to be decarbonized. I believe that is also a quite important growth area. And last but not least, but that's more general, energy management systems in itself. So if you operate, let's say, multiple sites across multiple countries, you somehow need to be able to monitor, steer the energy, predict what is happening, and then be able to control it better and save energy.
Thank you, Tim. Tim, do you operate in all four elements of the energy sector, which is generation, transmission, distribution, retail? And tell us a little bit about key products in each of the elements.
I'm happy to do so. I think so. First of all, our company doesn't exist that long, right? We just celebrated our 1 year anniversary as Eon One in June. So we legally exist for a little bit longer than 1 year. Maybe as a bit of a disclaimer. Secondly, setting up a new entity in the Eon group is of course not easy, because you need to fulfill to certain, let's say, requirements of security. So it takes a bit of time to have the entity up and running and have fully operational. That took us some months. And then I think in November, we went out to the market telling people that we exist and what our mission is, that we want to enable the energy transition via digitization. So let's say, I always tell people we're running around now a little bit longer than, let's say, half a year. And as a result, we start building up what we call an ecosystem of digital products. Right now, we are active in, let's say, 3 what we call subsegments in terms of grid connection, grid operations, and energy management system in its broadest term. And this is currently our focus. I say currently because our mission is to actually enable the energy transition in its broadest form. So we look into, let's say, additional technology, additional products, in order to expand our ecosystem of products, and help large utilities with their biggest problems. And to coming back on your question, can you give us some examples of products that we're currently bringing out to the market? It might make sense I explain a bit more detail how we build up the ecosystem, because we have, I think, a three-way approach. Either we develop our own technology, we build our own products with our own engineering and development teams, or actually we buy technology out of the market, and then I mean acquiring startups or scale-ups. Or thirdly, we partner with technology providers. We, for example, see amazing tech providers who are already active in different industry, but not yet in the energy industry. And if we see, let's say, the use case for the energy industry, we get in contact and we consider to partner with the party and then roll out the technology in the energy industry. So that's the way we do our business. So to give you some examples of the product that we're selling in these three categories, if you look maybe easiest to the, let's say, the buy side, we have so far acquired 3 companies. One is called Gridix, active in the home energy management space. They are right now I would dare to say European market leader in the HEMS space. Why? They've built the protocols to connect to any type of different brand or device to make to make it steerable in the home of a house owner. Why is that? On the one hand, to just optimize for self-consumption. And later on, if you have a so-called dynamic tariff, that means you pay a different price per quarter for your electricity, then you can even flexibly steer the household and even help solving the issues in the grid and get remunerated for that as a household owner. So I think that is one example of the company that we acquired called Gridix. What Gridix also does is what we call dynamic load management for CPOs, charge point operators. So if you build a large fast charging station, you need to dynamically, let's say, distribute your load to the cars that are at that moment charging to make sure you're not overrunning the grid capacity. So that is Gridix. Second solution, Envelio, this is a company that we acquired. They've built really an amazing so-called digital twin of the grid, a so-called electrical power flow model of the grid that is able to, let's say, calculate on a real-time basis the electricity flows to the grid. So in my view, and also a very important cornerstone for the energy transition. And while they have done that, while they've built this digital twin of the grid, they can also fully automate the grid connection requests for DSOs. So that is, let's say, that's the second example I would love to highlight. And thirdly, we recently acquired a company called Elva. Elva is active in the e-mobility space. They've built an amazing app, which we actually want to sell as a SaaS solution to others, because a lot of parties would love to offer e-mobility to the market. But right now, they don't have technology to do that, to have a proper app that they can offer. So that's another one. That is category one of what we acquired. Second category, we also built our solutions ourselves. And to give you maybe 2 examples, because right now we are marketing 6 products, and that's maybe too detailed to explain all in detail. I can give you 2 examples. One product is called Brightfield. Brightfield is actually a data acquisition system for what we call secondary transformer stations. You know, these concrete buildings in the streets, which actually have a transformer. What is interesting about that? We have millions of transformers in Europe, but I dare to say more than 90% is fully offline. So how do you know that the transformer is broken? Because at least 3 people in the surroundings call the distribution grid operator that they don't have electricity, right? And can you imagine, in the current world, is that where you need to be? I would say not, right? So you need to bring these transformers online. But we have actually within E.ON, we have found 2 amazing people who have, let's say, somewhere built an amazing solution for that. What is called Brightfield, and it's actually measuring the magnetic fields in the transformer station without touching the cables. And by doing that, it can automatically translate that into the so-called in the power curves. So you know the amount of power that goes to the station. But when they install the data acquisition system, they also put other sensors on there. So they actually also measure vibrations, light, noise, gases, and actually much more. And they use all of that data to simply actually conclude what is happening in the transformer station when something goes wrong to interact, or to simply understand if there are a lot of electric cars charging overnight and the transformer is not cooling down anymore, that at least they have a view and they are aware of that. So that is a solution that is actually fully, and I'm actually very proud of, because that is a fully in-house built solution by E.ON. So it's a hardware-software combination. It's a data acquisition system, but the complexity lies in the data. And we might touch upon that later as well. It generates 280 data points per second, and that's a lot for the people that don't know that. It's really a lot per transformer. So can you imagine if you would make the city of Munich online with a couple of hundred transformer stations, then you generate more traffic or data than Twitter does worldwide, right? This is the example that we always give, and that's only one city. But this solution has been completely built in-house by our own team, and I'm really proud of that. And we are bringing that out to the market now. Why? You can install it in 20 minutes, and it really helps. It really helps the energy transition, because you need to know what electricity flows through that to see where the problem rises. Second example, a product called Optimum. Optimum is able to do energy management of what we call multi-sites. So if you are a retailer, let's say, for example, a big shopping chain or supermarket chain with multiple locations across 1, 2, or 3 countries, you need to know how much energy is used per location. And you want to have a very simple solution, which first of all, let's say, connects and monitors the energy. And then thirdly, also is able to, let's say, predict and give you advice how you can save energy. And if the average energy consumption per site completely differs from another, something is wrong there. And for that, we also have built a solution which we're now rolling out in, let's say, in some countries. I can continue for a bit longer, but it's not a sales pitch. So, but at least I truly believe that all solutions that we have picked, for some kind of reason, in some kind of way, they do and they actually do help in the energy transition. And this is in line with what our focus is.
Very interesting, Tim. Well, I like the analogy between the Twitter and transformer. I don't know if you read recently, Elon Musk wants to change the sign of the bluebird on the Twitter. Yep. Maybe you should put a transformer there. Thank you. Tim, earlier you talked about flexibility. And you use that word, and I know when we talked earlier, you talked about it a couple of times. What do you mean by flexibility market?
Yeah, yeah, the flexibility market, it's quite a tough topic. Sorry, I'll take a bit of water here. If we talk about the flexibility market, it's quite a broad used term, because if I talk about flexibility, I mean the challenges that arise from the key trends in the grid and the supply and demand side. So key trend, we already discussed that in the supply side, much more decentralized energy producers, so-called DERs, decentralized energy resources. They produce electricity in quite a volatile way, only when there's wind or only when there's sun. On the other side, you have, let's say, the users of the energy, so the B2C, the consumers or the industry or the companies, and their, let's say, the patterns of energy, let's say, usage also change. Because if you are a household with solar panel on your roof, you most probably are actually producing electricity around lunchtime if you don't have a home battery for storage. And if you have an electric car, you most probably charge that car when you come back from work, which is between 5 and 7 during the day, PM, which is the most tough time for the energy market to actually supply users. Exactly. It's really peak time. And also this is when the price is high. So that doesn't make sense, to put it very simple. So on the one hand, you have the, let's say, the supply side with a much more volatile, well, it is predictable, but not steerable, let's say, a generation of electricity due to the renewables. And on the other hand, you have, let's say, the consumers who have a complete different offtake pattern. The challenge lies, or let's say the solution lies in digitization. You can only solve that problem if it becomes even bigger via digitization. So you need to continuously match supply and demand. I once worked at least at energy trading, not as a trader. Well, there I learned a lot about the energy market, but let's say in the so-called day ahead market, the day before delivery, supply and demand need to be 100% balanced, right? So if you are a supplier, you indicate how much you produce, and let's say the off-takers on an aggregated level tell how much they will consume. That needs to be matched. But that is all theory, and then the day itself happens, and then you see if there's no wind, or if of a big clouds coming by, then everything changes. And these changes are happening more and more often. So you need to be able to directly act and interact on that. So on the one hand, the suppliers need to continuously adjust, but also the demand side needs to continuously adjust. And so if I talk about flexibility, for me that means the flexibility market. So being able to keep the system in balance via a digitally playing there on both sides.
That's good, Tim. Thank you. Tim, let's change topics a little bit. Let's talk about this new fad these days about ChatGPT and generative AI.
Yeah.
We in Markets and Markets see this as a 15 billion market by 2028, growing rapidly. We also see a number of use cases within your sector, like analyzing customer behavior, grid optimization, simulation. You mentioned things like forecasting, including pricing forecasting. Tell us a little bit about what use cases of general AI do you see within the energy sector? And then the important question I have is, how do you make money from it? But it's great to have these use cases and AI can solve it, but how do you monetize them?
Yeah, I think I'm happy to give you some examples. So, and let's start with the most, let's say, precious topic there is again the grid. Because I already explained what does digitization in the grid means. For me, it means you need to be able first to create a foundation of digitization which is able to handle data. And once you have that, you can start measuring. If you start measuring, you create data, you store data. And as I think most of the listeners know, if you talk about AI, you need to have historic data. A lot of historic data analyzed already in order to be able to predict what is happening in the future. So step number one in the grid is you need to create a digital foundation, create historical data, put measurements everywhere. And then on that basis, you can actually start predict the future much better. And you can easily combine it with, let's say, other, data sources like weather data, which allows you to estimate how much electricity is produced via PV panels, the large one open in the field, but also the ones from households. And also you can use the data from, let's say, the charging stations at homes, but also the public ones, the fast chargers, to allow what pressure there arises on the grid. So once you have all of that data, you are able to forecast what we call congestion. Congestion means that the grid is full, right? That there's flowing too much electricity through the cable itself. One of the issues right now is that the amount of congestion simply arises, but also changes every second. If you actually have AI with a lot of historical data, you will be able to predict congestion and then, let's say, act upon that. So what would that mean? If there's congestion arise in one specific, let's say, city in a country, and make sure that, let's say, all providers or consumers of electricity get a signal, get an incentive to either change their demand or another way, or increase, let's say, production. There are different ways to do that. So for me, AI is the base in the grid to simply prevent congestion in the future to happen. Why is that important? Because we won't be able to put more and more cables in there. We're running at full speed. At least if I talk to grid operators, they're all running at full speed to get more cables into the ground, but that has a limit. And therefore, the solution lies there in digitization. So this is why I believe AI can really help the grid to predict what congestion happens when. That is one example. Another, let's say, bit of an other complete different example is if you look at the retailers, what during the Ukraine war, what happened, the call centers of energy suppliers really, let's say, were overwhelmed by the phone calls they were getting. People were concerned, people want to understand their bill, want to have issues with paying or anything else. What is great about that, there's great voice bot technology out there who can actually help already filtering out the easiest questions and answering that by AI. I explained to you about our business concept. We are now partnering, we will partner with a company who provides that voice bot technology. So if you need to call a energy supplier to give your meter readings, because in Germany we don't have, unfortunately, that much smart meters yet, you can easily do that via a voice bot technology, which is fully running on AI. So this is already where we now see the trends happening. And there's, I think, a second nice example. Then I think another one, I would say, for me, AI is an enabler. That's really how I see it. And I also believe that a lot of companies are looking for enablers. And this is also, of course, a link to a business model. If you're able to really, let's say, predict what the future brings in terms of energy use, of energy costs, and as a result, act upon that to either save energy, save CO2, or save costs, and let's say companies would be actually willing to buy the technology. And that is the link also to the question about like, how can we make money from that? What we now see is that, let's say, people are really willing to pay money for it. Because if we make that grid digital, if we really have this real-time monitoring of the grid and predicting what is happening every single second, people are willing to pay for it. So it is quite an easy model. But of course, you need to get there step by step.
Thank you, Tim. I agree with what you said, that all utilities are, rushing to put cables in the ground. They're always digging the road in front of my house, I tell you. Last question, Tim, a little bit more personal to you. You're a young CEO of a young company, as you said. Tell us a little bit about your leadership style and what goals do you set for yourself and your team?
Yeah, definitely love this question because it's an important and it's a crucial one. It also links to your earlier question, right? Why have we set up this separate legal entity? Well, we are creating our own company culture to start with. And I believe the success of a company right now in the digital space fully, for 100%, depends on the people, right? And you only can be successful if you can get access to the right digital talents. And what do people now care about? They care about the company culture. Let's say there are people who are accepting a much lower salary they could get at other companies, but actually go for the company culture. In digital, people already have a decent salary. They can, let's say, they can live with that and they're fine, but they're looking for a bit of a journey. They're looking for an adventure. Look at a company where they feel, let's say, connected to and also have a purpose. And that quite lies close to, let's say, my heart. What is my personal goal? I try to create an organization with, let's say, a company culture it's really cool to work with. And of course, we're part of the E.ON group, and E.ON is a utility with a, let's say, certain image. Depends on country though, and also depends on segment, and we do that differently. So we need to attract the right people, and therefore, for me, let's say a personal goal is to create that company culture. Secondly, and that also ties into let's say what you said about the young CEO. As a young CEO, I also have young kids. I have a daughter of 2 and a son of 5, which I'd love to spend a lot of time with. And that's also probably part of my generation. But I do like work, right? And I always say to people, for me, work actually is hobby, and I love to spend I would love to spend time on my hobby. But my kids are actually an even more important hobby for me. I even like them much more. So for me, the key challenge is to find the balance, and that ties into my personal challenge. My personal goal is always have and find the right balance. I cannot always be away. I miss my kids, they will miss me. So this is something I also try to, let's say, show to the team and see that and show that it's okay. And in my view, it's also part of, let's say, the modern world we currently live in. This is the only way, I think, to create a successful business. And we have a lot of people now around us. We are in a similar situation. So we create full flexibility, again, flexibility, but then in a different way, also for our employees. That we do whatever we can create to make their life easier, and for allowing them also to find the right balance. So that is, at least, there were the key personal goals for me. And of course, we have also the business goals, right? So our main goal is to, in the end, grow revenues. Why? For a lot of people, that sounds strange. We have a purpose. We want to enable the energy transition, and you want to talk about revenues. But for me, extra revenues is a sign that customers like what we do, that we actually do enable them to master the energy transition. Because if they buy your solution, they simply say, listen, what you're doing makes sense, and we'd love to have it. You're helping us, right? So for me, let's say growing our revenues is an important, let's say, goal, because it's a sign that we do the right thing. And of course, we want to grow fast, and we want to grow with a team, and we want to do that jointly. But as said, right? So it's all about finding the right balance, because a lot of people are so purpose driven that they can also be a bit lost, let's say, in work and in trying to achieve their goals.
Thank you, Tim. Tim, to summarize, I picked up a couple of words you said. One, you said balance and flexibility. I think that's really come out in the interview very well, and not to mention grid balancing and flexibility in the grid. So thanks for that. And personally, I think what you said, you and your team is taking a journey. It's an adventure. So good luck with it, and thank you very much for today. So this is Sarwant here, just signing off. I was talking to Tim. And I'm still see you at Eon One. Thank you, Tim, once again. Stay tuned for such interesting episodes on Disruption Dialogues.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to know how you can navigate and thrive in this disruptive era, subscribe to Disruption Dialogues on your go-to podcast channels and stay tuned for more interesting episodes.